Have you found that the geopolitical triggers have sort of increased interest in multiple citizenships aside from sort of the business and travel elements?
Definitely. And I would say, especially for us, since we are uh, for now heavily focused on the West, basically people from North America and Europe, um, for this target audience, generally the main reason why they invest in citizenship is diversification, and they see a second passport as an insurance policy. Also, one of our strongest channels is Twitter or X.com, basically because that's where most people or where many people go to stay on top of the news. So every time there's a big geopolitical event, something that makes you realize that, well, maybe I shouldn't depend on just this single country that is run by these politicians that I don't necessarily like or trust, and maybe I should seek additional citizenships to basically feel safer, preserve my wealth, also leave it as an inheritance to my children. So we really see these bursts in terms of political instability, which is very interesting, because we also feel like the more we grow, it's also a sign that these countries are keeping their citizens more unhappy, and every time they get more unhappy, these citizens decide to invest in additional citizenships or alternative citizenships.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I run an agency, Did It, a nonprofit, and a couple of other brands as well. Super excited to be chatting with Alex Recouso today, who's the founder and CEO of CitizenX. And CitizenX is really based on this premise that one's citizenship is an asset, and one should take care of that asset and grow that asset. So we'll start with the origin story, Alex. What was the origin story for CitizenX? Was there a particular catalyst or trigger for you and your co-founders and the original team that had you feel like now was the time to create this?
Thank you very much, Kevin. In terms of our origin story, I would say that in 2020, many of us, also my co-founders, we realized that citizenship is an asset, and it was very clear during that time, especially where your citizenship could determine whether you can leave your country or whether you cannot, and that's something that for most Westerners, people who were fortunate enough to be born in countries with strong passports, it's something that we usually don't feel. But also for people who were not so fortunate and they're from countries with weaker passports and the global south, it's a pain that they have been feeling all of their lives, not being able to access business opportunities, not being able to travel where they want, and all of that. So I would say at that moment we realized one of the dimensions of citizenship as an asset, that is basically mobility freedom and travel freedom. But quickly we realized that even if you don't think about it often, your citizenship determines many of the aspects in your life. It determines where you can live full time, where you pay taxes for many people with citizenship-based taxation that have to pay taxes globally. And really, this takes us to a point where we create the thesis that your citizenship is an asset, and we realize that not many people invest in their citizenship and diversify their citizenship as they do with other asset classes like real estate or stocks or cryptocurrencies. And obviously, one of the problems that we identified was education, that people usually don't often think this way about citizenship. But then the other element was that there was simply no easy way to invest in citizenship, and it was a very bureaucratic, slow, not transparent, and I would say even insecure process, where you would have to trust many third parties and many consultants and service providers. And we decided to essentially build a seamless platform, the same way you have other platforms to invest in other asset classes. So you could basically invest in citizenship, and we could connect directly citizens with countries.
That's great. Thanks for the backstory. When I sort of think about your marketing challenge, right, I sort of think about it as two broad ICPs or perfect target audiences, but there are going to be subsegments within those. But the two broad ones are the people who already know that they're interested in exploring another citizenship, and they would typically come in through search engines because they're proactively seeking, learning more about citizenship. And obviously having robust content is great from an SEO perspective or paid search. And then you've got these people who have no idea that a problem that they're solving, one of the solutions that will help them solve that problem is citizenship, exploring additional citizenships. So that is sort of further up funnel because they don't even realize that the problem is solvable, or the problem that they have or the challenge they're having is solvable. So how does that manifest itself in your marketing strategy? How does that manifest your content strategy?
Yeah, I would say that that's a really good way to put it. And even for the clients or potential clients that already have in mind their problem and that they're already aware and they're already looking for a solution, the sales cycle is very long, as you can imagine, because in the end, most of the programs that we offer, especially the citizenship by investment programs, they are high ticket products. The investments or economic contributions start in the six-figure range. And that, plus considering that your citizenship is one of your most sensitive assets, probably as sensitive as your health information, that makes that the required trust for someone to basically take action is extremely high. So even for like I said, for the people who are already aware and looking for a solution, the sales cycle, the points of touch, there are many points of touch, and it's a matter of months before they decide to take action. So I would say what's really important for us, and something that we really try to do for these people, is to basically build trust and build authority through content. And this is not just on search engines, like you mentioned. That is important to be able to help them answer the questions that they have, not just in terms of, for example, citizenship by investment in general, or going more specific about a specific program or a specific country, but also about very specific things within that country. For example, how often will I need to renew my passport? Once I get citizenship. So these are questions that appear during that process, during those months. But then what's really interesting is that there are also other channels where people look for this, and for example, YouTube is one of those, and that's why video content is also really important. And there are other players who have established basically their companies entirely on YouTube channels. Because basically this is something that people, they don't just Google it, and they're not just looking for text content, but they're also looking for media, and that also helps build more trust, because they're seeing a face, they're seeing someone behind the company, behind the brand, and that also builds more trust and helps people reduce that uncertainty. And then something that it's really interesting that you also mentioned is that people, or most people, don't even know that they're aware about citizenship as an asset, and they don't know that the problem they're seeking to solve could be solved through citizenship. The most obvious one that we usually encounter is taxes. People from countries like the US that tax their citizens globally, no matter where they live. So a US citizen living in Germany would still be liable for taxes in the US. And maybe they're looking for a solution for that problem, but they don't realize that that solution could be investing in a second citizenship and then renouncing their US citizenship. I'm not saying it's the best solution, but it's a solution for that problem. So there's a lot of these things that are, I would say, more top of the funnel, and that are even longer term than the previous case. And then something that also makes it difficult for us is that this has a lot of dimensions or a lot of approaches. So depending on where the person is coming from, their background, their current assets, their main nationality, for example, they would be encountering different problems. And then they would need different solutions. So, for example, like I was saying, someone with a weaker passport might be looking for a passport that is great for visa-free travel, but then maybe someone who is already, holding a strong passport, they might just be looking for a second one just to have protection, have more options, more optionality, and diversification. And then maybe they don't care so much about the strength of that second passport. So like I said, there are different problems, hence there are different solutions, and there are different points of touch that we seek for these different audiences.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I always think about YouTube as the second largest search engine, right? It just happens to be a video search engine. And of course, Google commingles video results into the main search engine results page as well. I'm curious if your team is also thinking about AIO, which is sort of SEO for chatbots. That's certainly an area that a lot is coming up a lot with Did It clients, with Did It prospects. It's great, getting our content or our domain into a regular search engine results page. That's great. That's wonderful. But for complex questions like this, sometimes people will end up asking ChatGPT or Claude, or they'll use Google's Gemini to dig, and that's a completely different search engine algorithm because it's an LLM algorithm instead.
Yeah.
So have you and your content teams and marketing teams been thinking about that as well?
Yeah, we think about that a lot, and basically, I like to think about it in terms of two different kind of searches. The first one is the typical search that was usually solved very easily by Google with an article, that was SEO optimized and whatnot. And those searches, I think that they are for sure solved better with LLMs and AI. And I think that so far the results that the AI uses to craft those responses are heavily based on search engine positioning. I don't know if that will change in the future. I think that so far it is heavily based on search engines like Google, like Bing. So our efforts have been basically targeting these search engines, and then we're seeing the benefits downstream in terms of LLM positioning. But then the second type of queries that I think that are a bit more complex or a bit more personalized, I think they will rely a lot on tooling. And that's why, for example, we put a lot of effort in developing tools that help clients answer their questions. For example, in terms of pricing, a very common question is how much this investment will cost me. And since these programs, in the end, they are based on laws and regulation, that is usually, one of those questions that used to be the first type of question that you would solve, reading a bunch of text and then figuring out, okay, so I'm applying with my parents and with my children, so that adds this amount of money to the investment that I need to make. And we are trying to basically create tools to solve that, asking the user about that information and then just, giving a better experience. And I believe that's where external AI tools or external AI engines will have a hard time to basically, answer those questions. But we will see. These things are advancing really, really fast, so you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. So, given the fact that it's a high consideration purchase and a fairly long sales cycle, I would imagine that you and the team were also thinking about, establishing a information exchange, right? In other words, getting personal identifiable information from somebody at the point where they feel enough trust with you that they want to share their email address or other PII. And at that point, you have to sort of treat them a little bit differently with drip campaigns or CRM or outreach, perhaps a newsletter. So how have you thought that part through? Because it seems like it's a fairly customized solution for each individual based on their specific parameters. So general information like newsletters may not necessarily fit or be relevant to me in my specific quest for additional citizenships. Whereas, and so there needs to be more personalization from that outreach perspective. And, given your business model, are those people who then sort of given you the permission to communicate, are they worth you hyper personalizing either with humans on your side or with some technology?
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say in terms of outreach, we generally do not personalize it so much because we usually keep it very general and very, you could say, high level in terms of, why you should invest in citizenship, regardless, what is your specific problem, what specific country you're looking at. So we try to keep it very general. And then where we go hyper specific is in terms of the product and the concierge human support. So all of our users have a concierge group chat with real humans and experts that can answer any questions. But then also from the product standpoint, the product improves the more information it has about you. So basically, if we know that you hold US citizenship, we could tell you that the US allows multiple citizenships without restrictions. And that is something that we can only tell you, or the product only tells you once you feel confident enough to give that piece of information that is basically, hey, I'm a US citizen. And that's how we like to think about it, always giving something away or making the user experience better every time we get information, because we feel like it's an exchange. And if someone is giving you something, in this case they are telling you their nationality, you should always give something in exchange. In this case, we're letting them know that they could invest in certain citizenship while keeping their US citizenship.
Right. That's great. So one of the other questions I had, it just really relates to the triggers that might be causing a person to start to investigate, right? Obviously, travel freedom might be one. Business opportunities abroad from their home country might be another. And then there's the sort of geopolitical overlay to everything. Have you found that the geopolitical triggers have sort of increased interest in multiple citizenships aside from sort of the business and travel elements?
Definitely. And I would say, especially for us, since we are for now heavily focused on the West, basically people from North America and Europe. For this target audience, generally the main reason why they invest in citizenship is diversification, and they see a second passport as an insurance policy. Also, one of our strongest channels is Twitter or X.com, basically because that's where most people or where many people go to stay on top of the news. So every time there's a big geopolitical event, something that makes you realize that, well, maybe I shouldn't depend on just this single country that is run by these politicians that I don't necessarily like or trust, and maybe I should seek additional citizenships to basically feel safer, preserve my wealth, also leave it as an inheritance to my children. So we really see these bursts in terms of political instability, which is very interesting, because we also feel like the more we grow, it's also a sign that these countries are keeping their citizens more unhappy, and every time they get more unhappy, these citizens decide to invest in additional citizenships or alternative citizenships. And what's also really interesting is then looking at the historical data, you can really see, for example, in terms of not just citizenship investments, but citizenship renunciations per month, and you could really see times like the 2008 financial crisis, where around 2009, 2010, the spike in citizenship renunciations was massive, because basically people, or a lot of people, lost trust in the government very fast, and they decided to not just invest in additional citizenships, but maybe renounce the citizenships they were the least happy with.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. You mentioned X is a place where people ingest news that could be one of the triggers. for their interest being spiked on exploring citizenship. What other social media channels has your team found to be effective, either on an organic basis or on a paid basis?
Yeah, so we rely heavily on organic. The only channel where we are heavily investing in terms of paid acquisition is search engines, because like you said, it makes sense to just bid for those customers who are looking for the solution already. But then in terms of organic, Twitter X has been working great, and not just in terms of news, but also in terms of research. For example, we have done extensive research, like the latest one we did was called the Capital Exodus. That was basically a dynamic tool where you can see the inflows and outflows of capital based on high net worth individuals who are living and arriving to different countries. So you can see how the policies in places like the United Kingdom are making a lot of high net worth individuals leave to other places, like, for example, the United Arab Emirates or the United States. And that worked not just as a tool on our website, but also as an infographic that you could share on social media. And it worked really well on Twitter. But then we are also opening up other channels like Instagram, for example, like Facebook. But I would say we are Twitter native, and so far is the one that has been working the best.
Right. So, Twitter's obviously, or X has changed with regards to formats, right? I mean, the old Twitter, went from I think it was 140 to whatever it was, 220. I can't even remember the exact character counts, and then obviously eventually embraced video and allowed you to do more effectively use things like infographics. So when you're creating a piece of content, how do you think about multi-use, right? Because a certain piece of content can often be repurposed. I mean, this podcast could be sliced up into little pieces, for example, or an infographic that you create will have use in multiple platforms potentially. It could end up being in LinkedIn if it's very business related, and it could end up on X if it's more general information. How do your editorial team think about this sort of multi-use of assets?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say we use the typical strategy of starting with long form content and then repurposing smaller pieces for different channels. And that goes mainly into two types of content. One is our podcast, that is basically video that gets uploaded to YouTube, to Rumble, and as well to Twitter in long format. And then we basically create smaller videos, and then we also create shorts for TikTok and for YouTube Reels. And then you have the second type of content that is basically research, like this one that I just mentioned, that usually goes on our website in terms of long form content. And then we repurpose infographics for Twitter, for Instagram. But what's really interesting that you mentioned as well is in terms of Twitter, how it changed, especially in the last months, where now it really gives a lot of weight to how much time people spend on your content. And that's why the videos are working really well. The infographics that really get people to zoom in and look at the exact numbers really work well.
So the competitive landscape for your category, has it changed during your founding, where there are a lot of other people jumping into the category, perhaps some folks who are I wouldn't call them bad actors, but perhaps don't value their own reputation as much as you guys value your reputation, and how are you dealing with the shifting competitive landscape?
I would say this is an industry that has been stuck probably for the last 20, 30 years since the first citizenship by investment program got launched in 1984 in St. Kitts and Nevis, the first modern program. Since then, it was mostly consultancies, traditional service providers who were doing this, with a lot of red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of manual labor. And then since we launched a bit longer than 1 year ago now, it's actually, I think it's exactly 1 year today since we launched publicly. There have been a couple of competitors that have, I believe, tried to follow our model of basically treating citizenship as an asset and allowing people to invest in it with a modern platform that is private, that is safe, that is efficient. And I think it's really great to see. And I see it as a new category or the next iteration of citizenship programs. And I think it's great that other people are also trying, because, for example, right now we are in all-time highs in terms of number of countries that allow you to invest in citizenship. There are 18 countries around the world that offer you citizenship in exchange of economic contributions. And I think the more people that try to build easy, safe, transparent ways to invest in those citizenships, the more countries will want to offer citizenship. And in the end, it's just a flywheel that will end up resulting in better options for citizens all over the world.
Yeah, that's great. On the content side, one of the things that we often help our clients with it when we met with me wearing my Did It hat is, they don't always have at the top of their mind what their content calendar should look like, or they sort of feel like, oh, I ran out of ideas for content, or I ran out of compelling ideas for content. And we often explore things like the co-creation of content, either with customers or with sort of friendly organizations that have a similar aligned interest, right? So in your case, your interests potentially align with some governmental departments within some of these countries who've now established either economic sort of advancement bureaus or whatever, where they're trying to get businesses to move their businesses into the country. And those may or may not also cooperate well with the teams who have the investment visa products. Have you found that certain countries have actually embraced an ability to, or the opportunity to co-create content with you? Or because they're governmental, do they usually have to sort of stay away from any third parties with regards to content creation?
That's a great question, and I feel like most countries, especially the most popular ones, are trying or try really hard to stay neutral, because in the end, they do promotion, and that's really interesting to see. The promotion coming from the government side of things. Most of them, they even have their own government agencies, separate from the investment agencies in terms of citizenship investment. And it's really interesting to see how they do marketing. But I would say it's really interesting as well how in most cases, I feel like the private companies, we tend to have more impact or reach more eyeballs than the government agencies themselves. So it would be really, really interesting to explore options to partner with them. But in the end, I think it's a joint effort. They do their promotion from the government side of things. In some cases, I know they have collaborated, especially when it comes to in-person events, organizing tours around the world, hitting different locations where there are critical masses of citizen investors. And I think those are great, but it would be great also to try to do something, more, let's say, newer in terms of marketing, because, still a big part of the industry moves offline in terms of events, professionals, advisors, but there's also a growing share of the industry that is online first. And, these are people that consume content on social media, on Twitter, on YouTube. So I think it would be great to do something on that end.
Yeah, one of the things that also comes up a lot in business conversations with certain types of businesses is whether or not there's a channel, right, for something, where meaning a group of organizations or a group of professions that, while it's not their primary business to be discussing, for example, citizenship as an asset, they're having the kinds of conversations around the kinds of problems, taxation, for example, where it seems like they would make logical channel partners, right? So you think about accounting firms, they talk about money, they talk about taxation, and to some extent, law firms, they talk about similar issues relating to business formation and to some extent, wealth preservation, right? With trusts and estates, and obviously to the extent that they could leverage things that are offshore, those would end up being potentially good channel partners. So have you guys thought about channel partnerships as, one of your marketing vehicles or sales vehicles?
Yes, we do, and it's great that you bring that up because essentially we have been partnering with professionals, advisors in different industries that have access to our, let's say, typical client, and they help them with different things. One of the ones that usually has the biggest overlap is taxes, and especially international tax lawyers that help with relocation to a new country, setting up companies, offshore bank accounts, things like that. Usually, these are the ones who have access to the type of profile that is more interested in citizenship investment, or that even asks them directly. But then there are, many other industries like family offices, wealth managers that have these sort of conversations that might spark, the search for a solution such as a citizenship investment to solve a problem that arises. And then there are other more or less related industries that also have been working quite well for us. For example, my co-founders have more of a cryptocurrency background than I do, and they really have a big network in terms of cryptocurrency investors, people who got in that industry probably a decade ago, and that now have basically made big holdings. And for the same reasons, they decided to invest in cryptocurrencies some decades ago. That was basically the need for an alternative solution of a system that they no longer trust so much. In this case, the fiat money and the traditional money system, and they were looking for cryptocurrencies. Now they're looking for alternative, solutions for their citizenships. So it's really interesting to see how industries that might not seem related at all can have or can become great channels for us.
Right, right. I'm curious whether you have scenarios where a person comes in with a particular perspective of investing in an alternative citizenship, but then sort of modifies their initial strategy as a result. So, for example, business people who are thinking perhaps of expanding overseas and having additional overseas offices or even moving businesses overseas, may initially think, oh, it's as easy to set up a business in these other countries as it is in the United States, and realize either that it's not as easy or that there are potential headwinds within those countries with regards to things like, for example, hiring and firing of staff, right? And so as they learn more, they may change their perspective on either which country is the best fit for them, or maybe how important the business element of diversification is in comparison to sort of the personal diversification.
Yeah, so I would say that's usually the case for European countries. And to put this a bit into context, most of the countries that offer citizenship by investment are small countries. There are a few big ones like Turkey, Portugal, Malta, that have a bit of reputation, and this can be in some cases good or it can be bad. I would say, for example, in the case of Portugal, it's generally a good reputation. Like someone who, when thinking about Portugal, they think about a sunny country with good weather that is safe, that has great food, and that is in Europe. So generally, they already have a good perception about Portugal. So when they start thinking about citizenship options, Portugal with the golden visa, usually sounds great. And I would say we see many cases of people who are attracted to certain countries for the perception that they have about the country. But since they have not done so much research about the program itself or the citizenship itself, they don't have such an uninformed criteria, let's say. So there are many cases of people who, for example, are initially interested in Portugal because of the positive association to the country. But then when they learn that it takes 5 to 6 years to get that passport versus 1 year in another place, they realize that it might not be the right solution for their problem in case it is a plan B, seeking diversification, seeking more optionality, because it will take a lot of time. So I would say, there are many cases like that, and they relate mostly to the perception, the marketing of the countries themselves, and how they are positioned in the minds of the people, even before they consider citizenship, residency, or company incorporations.
So final question is really for other marketers, right? So you have a fairly long sales cycle solution, right? And it's also a high consideration. But yet you've sort of decided that you need to make the marketing investment, right, to fill your funnel, even though it may take a while for that funnel of sales leads, I guess you'd call them, or potential customers, to make its way through the process. So for similar sort of high ticket B2B or even B2C solutions or products where marketers are sort of chomping at the bit to get there and get the sales and get get the revenue flowing, but yet their offering doesn't necessarily lend itself to an immediate conversion. How would you suggest they think about the sort of marketing and sales process so they can feel confident that they're putting their money in the right place and their human capital and their dollar capital?
So I would say it really depends on your needs as a company as well. For example, in our case, since we raised a bit of money from basically angel investors, we had the capital to invest and to think, let's say, medium to long term. But if you don't have that capital, or even if you have it, I would say you have to offset those long-term returns that are basically investing in channels that have a longer sales cycle or investing in brand. You have to offset that with things that will bring you business in the short term. For us, for example, what we have found that works really well, like I was saying, is partnering with professionals, advisors that already have this trust with their clients because they have been working with them for years or decades. And basically, if you can convince one person, you will be convincing all of their clients because they will be doing the work for you. So I would say for people that either don't have the capital to invest in long-term bets or to wait a lot of time because maybe they are a bootstrapped business and they need the capital to reinvest, then focus on things that will bring the return on the short term. And then when choosing the things that you want to invest in the long term, I really believe in first principles and basically thinking, with a bit of logic about what makes sense. Like you were saying, you don't have to be, an expert in the industry to figure out that, well, it makes sense that, people are searching for this on search engines. So if I do good SEO and I invest in good content, over the long term, I will probably do fine. And that's something that, just thinking about it with a clear mind and some logic, you can arrive at those conclusions. So I would say that you just need to arrive at those conclusions and then develop conviction to also, stick to that for some months or some years until you start seeing the results.
That's great advice. Thanks so much for joining me, Alex. It's a fascinating story about how you started the company and how you're marketing it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.